Gents, welcome back. We're here for another episode of the Landlord podcast, and today is the auction episode.
And that pack there allows you, if you're making a decision on a property, a much better position than you would be if you were buying through the normal route. So this comes not just for landlords, but for anybody looking to buy at auction. There is a full legal pack provided on any property that you buy for auction. If it's not available, the legal pack, the property is not available to buy, so you cannot buy a property.
It's one that I've really been looking forward to. I cut my teeth as a runner in an auction room as a trainee, which I really enjoyed, actually. I found it really exciting. So it's good to get back and have Lee in this room to talk about how auctions changed, where it's going, and how they're doing in 2022. I think a lot of landlords have got some misconceptions about how to buy or how to sell in the auction room, so it'd be really exciting to see what he's got to say for himself, how they're changing, how things are moving, and what's happening. But Ian, you've not met Lee before. What are you looking forward to getting from this podcast?
Well, straight away I've learned that you were a runner in an auction room, and that in my head
didn't do much running.
It just seems funny. I don't know why. It seems funny for some reason. But for me, it's going to be fact finding. It's really a fact finding process, because, like you say, there's misconceptions. SDL is a modern version of an auction in my mind, much like we operate as an agency. So it's how an auctioneer is now operating in the modern day life with everything that's gone on, and then really getting into the detail of the benefits of actually selling or buying as a landlord, really. So I've got some really good questions here that are just going to hopefully, get some good answers for the people listening. Can you buy in certain processes? How does it impact with mortgages, speed and timescales? With tenants in situ, not tenants in situ, questions like that. So looking forward to getting stuck into this one. What about yourself, Tristan?
Yeah, exactly what you said there. I think the benefits of selling and also the process, and people, whether you can buy on a buy-to-let mortgage and the timeframes, and if there's any restrictions on doing so.
Lee's been an auctioneer for the thick end of a decade. We're not afraid to ask him every question under the sun about how this is going to work. So, guys, let's bring him on. Lee, thanks for joining us. It's been a long time coming. A lot of organisation has come into getting you on our podcast because you're a busy guy. Now, as we mentioned on the intro, Lee is the head of auctions at SDL, which is the biggest online auctioneer for property in the UK. So again, Lee, thanks for your time today, and I hope everybody enjoys what we've got to go through. First question, which is the open question, which we always ask: how did you get into property?
Well, it's about 11 years ago, started out in property. I actually ran a maintenance company. So that's how I started, maintenance for property for landlords. That quickly progressed into selling the company at a fairly young age at university, and then moved into what was the largest estate agents in the Northeast. So I started working for them, doing property management and maintenance management for landlords. Specialised in that for quite a while. And yeah, just always had a bit of a passion for property. So from fairly working in university to business management, and then it was kind of moved into property by running the maintenance company, and that all stemmed from just having family that did maintenance at the time, so repair work and stuff like that. So yeah, it was a very early age of moving into property, and just had a real passion for it. Always wanted to have a portfolio, which I've not managed to get to, but will one day. So that's where it started, and then been in property ever since. Never come out of it. Moved, progressed into sort of sales, and then now obviously auction. But yeah, so it's a fair few different roles throughout my career to cover all bases.
Great stuff. Lee, again, sort of thanks for coming on. And what I wanted to ask the question is, the traditional auction, if you say it, what a lot of people will think is some dingy conference centre somewhere, some old guy with a hammer.
Absolutely.
And that's the kind of, vision that you kind of get.
Yeah.
But obviously yours is online. So could you just talk us through in a bit more detail what the difference is between the two?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely, 99% of people will look at an auction and just think, old guy with a gavel, slamming it down every 5 minutes and saying sold. And that still happens in the marketplace currently. And it's still a huge part of what we do as a company as well. But actually, the biggest part of what we do, as well as you mentioned there, is we offer online auctions for partners and any sort of direct clients to us, where we put properties onto an online bidding platform, as well as a live streamed auction as well, which is a lot more diverse than a normal traditional auction. What that does is it opens the marketplace up to more individuals to come forward with properties that you wouldn't actually expect to see in an auction. So you wouldn't expect to see, a 3-bedroom semi-detached house that someone's moving out of to move on to their upgrade or, relocation. But actually we see that more and more every day. And that's probably my bread and butter in terms of what I work on, and not, the rundown £5,000 property that then achieves 50,000, through an auction. So the way it works is it is all online, and people are directed to our website to register, view the property, and then obviously look to bid through a platform. It's very simple to do. You register. We use the analogy sometimes it's a little bit like eBay for property. And the reason we do that is because eBay is one of the biggest auctioneer services in the world, and people don't realize every time they're interacting with eBay, they're interacting with an auction in a lot of sense. You might have a buy it now button, or you might be bidding on an iPhone that you want, and it starts at £1. And what happens is you get up to £1,000 knowing you're not going to pay £1. It's the exact same way that an auction works online. We put it down at a lower price to generate the interest, to get as many people registered, and we let those guys do the work. We let the bidders do the work to really generate the interest and push the price up to get the best possible price. The benefit of having it online is that you don't have to go to that dingy conference room, in Manchester when you live in, London, or in London when you're in Manchester. That's a thing of the past. There's not that commuting, that time spent doing your due diligence to get there on the last day of the month and, hitting that deadline. It's all online. You can see everything that you need to see. You can see the property in your local area. You can then bid on the property in the comfort of your own home, or with myself, if you felt more comfortable doing that. We offer that service as well. So yeah, it is a lot different now, and that misconception, or even that preconception, which again, anyone listening to this and looking into this, they're not the individual that just thinks that. 99% of people probably do. And my job and my team's job is to break down those barriers and overcome that fear of coming into an auction or purchasing through an auction.
I guess for the seller as well, it's about how do you create more eyeballs on your property is kind of the real key element. And I always wondered at auction, or worried potentially for a seller, whether there's enough eyeballs to really get the right price for that property. If you've got 39 people sat in a room, does that really give you the ability? Whereas this, it opens it up, to a worldwide market in reality. And it's much like what we've tried to do with, if you've got portals that 300-400 people might see it, if you open up to social media campaigns, thousands of people see it. So it's increasing the reach. It's moving with the times, isn't it, in reality?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's great to see the concept.
Yeah, it is. You're totally right there. It's moving with the times. And I think we don't really like to talk about the C word. I'm sure we don't want to do doom and gloom on this call, but with the pandemic and COVID coming into it, I think a lot of the traditional auctioneers have obviously diversified and moved over to online. But prior to that, we had been running online auctions, 2-3 years before, and obviously pioneered that. And it's the largest part of our business, or certainly one of the largest parts of our business, where we generate revenue from there. We're helping, hundreds of sellers and buyers as well move every day. So it is all about that sort of moving with the times. And like you say, if you are having a very geographical location of an auction, then you are going to limit the audience and the bidding potential. Whereas when we're doing it, we're opening it up to anyone and everybody from anywhere, working with our partners, with the seller, and obviously our own database to introduce people.
So a question I've got, obviously this is a podcast for landlords and property investors. I would imagine they'll know, and we'll touch on the purchasing element of things too, but I guess it's a two-part question. If I'm a landlord looking to sell, what's the benefit for me as a landlord looking to sell? And in the second sort of tag on to that, can a landlord sell at auction with tenant in situ, or does it need to be vacant?
Yeah, the USPs of selling for a landlord is that it is all about speed and getting that transaction done. In reality, you don't want to be sitting on a vacant property, and if you've made that decision to dispose of that property, we've all sold properties here, and anyone listening is either sold or definitely purchased a property. Speed comes into it when you've got a financial commitment and a commercial aspect to your investment. And if you're sitting on the open market for 3 to 4 months to get that transaction through with a potential buyer, that delay comes in and costing you money in reality. With auction, obviously, we are dedicated to specific deadlines. So the buyer is committed to certain deadlines as well as the seller. So they offer them speed, and there's always security as well. So we're always taking financial commitment from the buyer in the way of either deposit or a fee that's paid. So they're getting financial commitment as a buyer immediately on the property. So the seller's got that comfort. Actually, no one's going to walk away from this sale, and that results in less fall throughs and more transactions going through and a speed of time, and obviously a lot more security. So those are the main ones for landlords. To get the job done. Like I say, I've been a landlord previously myself, and when I did look to sell, getting the money out of the property was quite an urgent thing for me, because I needed to relocate. So to move, I needed to sell that property to release some funds so I could then purchase in a different area. So that is important to everyone, I think, who's made that decision. Your second question, and obviously the one that most people don't think they can do, is you can absolutely sell it as a tenanted property with an ongoing established tenant. That's absolutely fine. We just need a few more details from the seller, if they're being honest, in terms of tenancy agreement, where the deposit's held, just as you would normally sell it through the open market. We then obviously advertise all of that, and sometimes it's better because you get that yield already. And if I'm making that investment, just as you would sell it at the moment for a landlord, so I'm getting that investment as a new landlord, I've got a ready-made income coming straight in. I'm paying down 100 grand, but I've just made £500 back the month after, so, and I don't have to wait and pay agency fees and get it relet. So yeah, there's nothing different to selling a property vacant to a tenant. We just need to have the tenant's information, make sure there's obviously no rent arrears and all that sort of stuff. But we do enhance enhanced due diligence prior to putting it to the auction, so the new buyer can be absolutely sure they're making the right decision.
I think there's a lot of landlords out there, maybe first-time landlords, that are now looking at purchasing, and a lot of them seem to ask us, it would be nice to buy a property that had a tenant in already. And
yeah, absolutely.
Maybe if we went back kind of 5-6 years ago, Mike, that was the opposite of what people wanted. But there seems to be more and more people now interested in purchasing tenant in situ. And that from a auction perspective, for maybe purchaser and for seller, because they're not always the easiest properties to move on. In normal resi day, sales markets with tenant in situ, but that potentially could benefit quite a few landlords, I think, Mike, that maybe they're not aware of.
Yeah, I think if you're selling a property with tenant in situ on the normal open market, it really limits your number of buyers, because you've got a limited number of landlords in comparison to first-time buyers or home movers. And the other side of things, traditionally, mortgage companies, for one reason or another, don't like it, which I've never understood. Mortgage companies quite often demand that you have a vacant possession, even though it's a buy-to-let property, which in my opinion, you have a benefit of buying with a tenant in situ with a history of payments, and a reference from the agent that you're running from. And as you said, Lee, instant income rather than a month void period and up to £1,000 worth of letting fees. It's instantly more profitable. So it's always confused me why mortgage companies are a little bit anti buy-to-let with tenant in situ. So my main question really is kind of on behalf of those first-time investors, the Mr. and Mrs. Jones, who are looking for somewhere to park their pension cash. I think people are nervous of buying at auction because they don't understand it, and they see it as a bit of a threatening place, because it's a high-pressure situation, right? You have to make the decision on the day. What's the situation? How do SDL try to get over that?
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head as Ian did before that. There is absolutely, again, probably a misconception of an auction being this place where you are bullied into placing an offer down, making a decision on a property, or an investment or whatever that might be immediately without, being able to do surveys or due diligence or, making sure you've got mortgage offers in place. Again, it is a wrong conception of auction. We offer on every sale a full auction legal pack for any buyer to review. Prior to even registering to bid, you register and you can download those documents without actually viewing the property, without inquiring about it. You can go onto our website, download the legal documents. In those legal documents, you will always have a set of buyer's terms, which is obviously set down by SDL. So those will be terms that you need to adhere to purchase through the auction. And that there will be your highlight areas will be any admin fees or fees that are due to be paid. So they'll be highlighted directly onto those buyer's fees. So they're not hidden costs. They're absolutely said you need to pay £1,000 towards the auction for the legal pack or for just the benefit of purchasing through the auction. There will always be any legal fees highlighted very clearly in those buyer's terms. You'll then have obviously your dates and times of when you need to purchase. So what is the structure? How will you be looking to do that? You'll then have further due diligence, which will be special conditions of sale, which will detail all of those. Again, more conditions if there's any attached that highlight how are you going to buy this property? How is the sale going to go through? All of those information in there. Then you have more your standard stuff, so your title documents or your leasehold information. You'll then have your tenancy agreements, any sort of rent arrears or anything will be highlighted there. Your APC will be there. You'll also have your searches, so you'll have your local search, and you'll have a water and drainage search as well. And that pack there allows you, if you're making a decision on a property, a much better position than you would be if you were buying through the normal route. So this comes not just for landlords, but for anybody looking to buy at auction. There is a full legal pack provided on any property that you buy for auction. If it's not available, the legal pack, the property is not available to buy. So you cannot buy a property. The way I always look at it, the legal pack is fundamentally the actual part of the auction that makes it an auction. Because if you don't have it, it's near on impossible to buy through auction if you don't have a legal pack, unless you are a very, very savvy buyer in terms of you're going to make a decision on a property where you have got, it's a £5,000 property and you're going to rip it down and you're not bothered about what it is. You might go and offer that money, without a legal pack, but that's very, very rare in what we sell today. So to answer your question, the legal pack is fully available. And there is no pressure. If yes, you've got a deadline, and obviously you need to work towards that deadline because we've said we're going to sell it on the 26th of January. It's going to sell at 2 o'clock. So if you're coming into that fairly fresh, there could be an enhanced pressure situation, but there is no pressure to purchase. At that point, if you don't feel comfortable to do that, we obviously have everyone trained and developed to talk you through that, to help you. You can have surveys done on properties prior to placing bids. You can get mortgage offers on properties prior to placing bids. And at the point you're placing a bid, you are committed. So, it is important that you do that due diligence. But at that point, you are then committed to purchasing. And like I said at the start, you would be paying down some sort of financial commitment in terms of a deposit or a reservation fee to make sure that you are securing that property and that the seller can't retract from or rescind from that contract. So the enhanced due diligence makes it absolutely paramount that you can go on to know what you're buying, to understand what you're buying, and make that informed decision before coming to auction.
It's interesting because on a whim, in reality, when you purchase a property in the normal market, you do a viewing 20 minutes and kind of obviously then you make a decision. Yeah. You don't have the same timescales, but in this market, you really do. You have to make that decision that weekend or it's gone by Sunday morning. But the pressure is that you're making it based on visually what you've seen, whereas actually you don't really have much of that due diligence. I mean, we're fortunate that we give key facts for buyers, so we do give quite a lot of information, but not from a legal pack standpoint, just from a local info point of view. And then at that point, people have to put non-refundable money into searches and surveys. So there's £600 in without really knowing anything about the property. Whereas in this case, actually, you would feel, as long as you're savvy in property and it's not your first transaction and you feel like you understand, because I think that's more that's more an emotional and kind of confidence thing. When you buy your first property, it feels such a big thing. When you buy your second, it's like, oh, I'm buying my second house. So I think that actually gives people probably a lot more confidence because they've got a lot more information. And if you've got, better information, you can make a better decision. So that's a really good answer that I think people will hopefully take a lot from. In terms of just sort of transactions, I'm interested to know trends. I'm always talking about what goes on with data, but just over the last kind of 5-10 years or whatever the data kind of supports, are we seeing more auctions taking place? As the online auctions meant that there's more volume? Is it becoming more niche? What's kind of the transaction volume like in the UK?
Yeah, so if you said sort of reference the 5-year mark, if you do scroll back sort of 5 to 6 years, the auction market only made up around about 1% of the UK market. So it was a very, very small sort of marketplace. It hasn't grown, astronomically and took off as certain areas of the world has, but it's doubled in size. It's now around it's around about 2%, just over 2% of the UK marketplace. So 5 years, as we know, it's not a very long time, especially what's been going on the last 2 years, and it's sort of changed a lot of aspects of where we've gone. But I think that shows that actually auctions are becoming a lot more viable for not just your savvy investors or your people who are just looking to buy to flip, but also your buy to let investors, as we're talking about now, but also for your first time buyers as well, or for your home movers who are moving on. It becomes a lot more accessible because of that legal due diligence, but also the introduce of different conditions of auctions. So you've got your traditional auction, then you have your more modern auction method as well, where you're not contractually obligated at the point of sale, but you are financially reserving that property. So it's a reservation agreement. So you reserve that property by basically like a new build. In essence, you place down a reservation fee, it reserves that property for you, and you've got a set period of time to then complete on that transaction, making that more viable for anyone who's looking to, obtain a mortgage on that property, who's moving necessarily. There's a bit more time involved. There's a bit less legal aspects at the point of the sale agreeing. So that's helped hugely to increase the volumes through auction for your job blog public. That's become a lot more of a way to market. And to give you some aspects on it, we sell around about sort of 60% of our units are through the traditional market and 40% are through the conditional market. So you can see actually that, and this doesn't diversify between it has to be a rundown property being unconditional, or it has to be a home mover to be a conditional. There is no set rules for that. So, anyone who is purchasing a property for auction, when the conditions are attached to that property, i.e. more of a traditional or more of a modern, that would be purely based on that seller's own circumstances at that point and what we have, discussed with them to set for those guys. So if you were selling a property now and you said, I just want to get rid of it, Lee, I want to dispose of it, I need the cash out of it, I would be advising you to go down the traditional route where we have those little bit more strict timescales involved, where we have the due diligence ready and we commit the buyer and you to a more sort of formal legal proposition. But if you said to me, I want to sell this as a tenant investment, I'm looking to get a bit more from that, I'm not in any hurry, I might go down the more modern route, so I'd have that more modern auction available to you, where we can open that up to a lot more of a, as Mike was saying, to a first-time investor who might want to do a bit more enhanced due diligence, who might be getting a buy-to-let mortgage for the first time and need a little bit longer to obtain that, and might want to go through their income, their expenditure, and do a little bit more on that buyer. So the conditions are not necessarily on the property or what that looks like. So it's on the circumstances of that seller, and that's increased market share for auction over the last, like I say, 5 years or so. And actually, during the pandemic, every auction house seen an increase on what they were doing, purely in the fact that we could offer a secure sale through a very testing time. And we've seen a lot of agents and a lot of sellers coming to us for help and advice on properties because of that situation where we had a stamp duty holiday, we had a lot of fall throughs in the marketplace. So stamp duty holiday allowed, agents to really capitalize on turning their stock a lot more. It helped landlords obtain tenant investments, or move somebody that was in rent arrears, or was taking a hit on something. So it's become a wide area where people are now coming to us for help in terms of using us as a last resort, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And as we talked at the start, that misconception is starting to reduce, and actually people are starting to open up to this could be the normal way of doing things in another 5 to 10 years. It could become a lot more of a normal way of doing the transaction.
Yeah, it's good. It's good because you always think it's just fast and cheap from a seller's perspective, but actually bringing that extra more modern style, in reality, it means you can do fast and potentially cheap. It depends on the circumstances.
Yeah.
Or you can do more logical and try and push for a slightly better price with a little bit more patience, which is great to know. I'm glad you brought up stamp duty, because the whole time you were talking then I just was thinking, just for my own peace of mind, what was stamp duty like in the auction world? Because it was absolutely bananas for us. So how did that impact your business?
Yeah, it like I say, it really took off, because anyone who was struggling to turn that pipeline in an agency world to start with was struggling slightly. With the enhanced due diligence, to do that in a set time scale, you can absolutely take advantage of the auction process, because you're then making sure that seller gets, or that buyer gets, that property within that stamp duty. We had a lot of sellers come to us, a lot of landlords as well, who were wanting to take advantage, because obviously prices were high, and they wanted to make sure that they could sell the property in that period of time. So yeah, we've seen a huge increase, and we had a fantastic time obviously helping everyone move with the stamp duty. It is a shame that it had to come to an end. I'm sure everyone in the industry is feeling the same. But from a seller's point of view, from a landlord's point of view, if you were looking to capitalize on that, auction was the best route, because actually you could guarantee that transaction would be done by a set period of time. And we really skyrocketed when the last sort of, it was July it ended, wasn't it? I can't remember now. It was just
Phase one.
blur. Yeah. We absolutely skyrocketed in this sort of the April time, with an increase of listings coming towards us, referrals, and then all of a sudden that transfixed into my sales figures have been very stressed, but actually getting quite a lot of deals across the line. And since then, obviously, I think with everyone, we've seen a dip in stock through the marketplace, slightly to auction. I think
that's just seasonal at the moment. I think all agents are feeling.
I think everyone is feeling
that element.
Yeah.
I'm interested on the timescales, Lee. What is kind of the average auction on more conditional? What would be the average time for hammer goes down, or virtual hammer, physical hammer goes down, and what would we expect to see when the keys are handed over to the new owner?
Yeah, so taking it to market, we run auctions for no longer than sort of 21 days. So an auction cycle would be 21 days. Once the property has sold in that auction cycle, it can sell before as well. So, again, there's a misconception that once the date is set, that it has to follow through to that date. If we get an offer on your property, Ian, after 7 days of being, on the market, and you wish to accept that, it's your property, you can choose to accept that, and the buyer would then be committed. But typically they'll run from anywhere from sort of 7 to 21 days. Once you have sold the property on a conditional, the standard time frame is 40 days to complete. So in essence, you're getting 2 months to the transaction being completed.
Okay, that's good to know, because I think it's interesting for people to feel that effectively they're going to get a month's void, maybe 2 months void if you include the marketing in it. Whereas in a standard kind of transaction at the moment, you touched on, obviously your sales progressor getting stressed. I think a lot of solicitors, we just didn't see them over December. As soon as the second phase was finished, they were gone.
On holiday. Yeah, absolutely.
They were out of there. I felt sorry for them last year.
Actually. I think they deserved it a little bit, didn't they? So
Yeah.
I think they did deserve. Some of them did. So yeah.
A couple of quick questions for me then. Just interested to know, can you buy an auction as a business, as a limited business, or does it have to be just an individual person?
Yes, you can. Yeah, you can buy it as a company. That's not a problem at all. We get a lot of people buying them as a company. It's not a problem.
Great stuff. And in terms of mortgages, obviously mortgage lenders offer different products, if it's a leasehold, if it's a freehold, if it's a certain age property, if it's a Victorian property, there's all different ratios. But just by general, is there any different terms, conditions that you find from a mortgage lender when someone's buying at auction? Is it stricter on the loan to value ratio or different products, or is it a niche market for mortgage lenders?
No, there's nothing that prevents you from using a high street mortgage offer through auction. The only thing I would say is that when you are looking at your mortgage, just be careful with those timeframes involved. As Mike touched on it before about kind of that first time investment, that first time buy to let. We all know it can be a fairly strict process in terms of you're going through your finances for the very first time and looking at, can you afford this, if there's void periods, all of that sort of stuff. The lender's not a problem. When you're buying through auction, you just need to make sure that lender will agree to those terms of the actual timescales. And if that's on a more traditional auction, you just need to be prepared that actually the best scenario would be to have your mortgage offer prior to making the offer on the auction. So because you're going to exchange and have a set period of time to complete, then have that offer in place, so then you can go forward and know confidently that you'll hit that deadline. The worst thing that you could do, and this is a word of warning to anyone buying for auction, as to believe that you've got the mortgage offer, but not the actual mortgage in principle, but not the actual mortgage offer sitting there. Then you exchange and commit to this property, then all of a sudden that mortgage offer doesn't come through. That's the worst position you could be in, because it's a very legal point. So it's a good thing you brought that up, actually, because mortgages, you can certainly buy for auction with a mortgage. Don't let that put you off, but make sure you're at the point of getting the offer before you commit to an auction.
Is where a good broker comes in, because if you
Absolutely.
explain it to them that you need to know who's doing the quick underwriting at the moment, who's slogging it out and it's delaying. So yeah, it's a solid point. I've hogged the mic, Tristan. I'm going to fire over to you for our quick fire questions, which sometimes they're quick and sometimes they're not. But Tristan, I know you've got three of the best. I look forward to this part. Over to you, bud.
Thanks, Ian. So the questions I've got it's personal. It's business minded taken away. So forget the business itself. It's what you feel is going to happen, and just speak freely on that, if that's okay. But just with regards to the property market, we've seen it absolutely incredibly busy over the last couple of years, especially. And I've certainly seen it maintaining coming into this year. But how do you predict the property market in the near future? Where do you see it going?
That's a good question, isn't it? If I had that crystal ball, I'd be a millionaire, Tristan. I do think, Ian mentioned that it is quiet out there at the moment, but that is probably seasonal. I personally, and yes, personally, so this is my personal opinion, not STL's. I personally feel that the market is going to stay strong. I do. I don't see it. We are still very strong in the marketplace at the moment. Sale prices are still very good, and that's coming from an auction house. So that's an honest truth, that the sale prices are still good. There's still a lot of buyers out there to stock ratio. So I see it increasing. I think it will have to peter out at some point. It's going to have to peter out at some point and hit a level. Will that decrease over time? Like I say, if I knew that, I'd be a millionaire. And I think in reality, it's got to start coming down a little bit, because we're starting to see that people are struggling to get lending on certain things, and mortgage companies are tighten up a little bit more, and that's going to happen over time. So yeah, I think it's going to stay strong, certainly over the next sort of 6 to 12 months. You'll have your seasonal times again. We are always notoriously quiet in the August. I think most people would say the same, and then coming into that Christmas period. But yeah, I think it's going to have to peter out. That's what I would say. And I think we're just starting to see that a little bit, with it. But yeah, that's where I'd be.
Time will tell.
Time will tell, yeah.
And then regarding a buy-to-let, if you was to invest in a perfect investment, what does that look like to you?
I'd actually, now being in this industry for a long time, I would personally go for a tenanted property. If I was looking at a buy-to-let, I would want to be getting an instant return on my investment with immediate effect. So I wouldn't necessarily be focusing too much on the yield, because the rents have been good again. So rents are always up and down again, but like the property market, they'll fluctuate. So I wouldn't necessarily be focusing huge amounts on the yield with interest rates. Not getting very much when you're putting your money in elsewhere. So actually, any yield that you're getting at the moment, it's better than what you'd be getting anywhere else in the marketplace. So for me, I'd be looking at something that's already bit work done to it, so I don't have to spend a lot of money on something in terms of renovations, and I'd be looking at a good rental with a solid tenant. That's what's hard to come by these days as well. Finding a solid tenant who's willing to commit to you for a period of time. There's a lot of help out there for first-time buyers, and we've all seen that. So to find a good tenant who's not looking to move, to purchase a property is actually really difficult. So to do that, I'd be looking at that for my perfect investment.
Perfect. And what's the best single piece of advice you can give a landlord?
Keep your tenant happy. That's what I'd say. I did maintenance for 2.5 years at the early start of my career of property management. And the one thing I could say is a happy tenant is a quiet tenant, and a happy tenant will, if there's any issues that do crop up, they will be more than helpful with that issue. Landlords that don't necessarily respect their tenants or look after their properties are gonna have issues constantly, and they're gonna have a high turnover of tenants coming through. That's a lot of cost. We all know the cost involved with getting a tenant these days, and a good tenant. So for me, keep the tenant happy and keep the property maintained. And it's as simple as, if you do those things, you will have a good, solid income and a good portfolio through rentals, in my personal opinion.
I'm glad you've touched on that, to be fair, because over the podcast, it's been banged on about over and over again. And Megan especially was one of them, is you get out what you put in. So keep your tenant happy. And I have to agree. And Mike said it before previously. So yeah, it's definitely something for landlords to look out for.
Yeah, no, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? If you do any service, we are all using services at the moment, so we all will use a phone contract or Sky or something along those lines in terms of what we do, and we expect a certain level of service and product from that for the money that we pay. And there's no difference with a rental or a car. You expect a certain level of service to what you're putting in, and if you're paying £550 a month, £600 or £1,000, you expect that level of property to be maintained. And if I've got an issue, and it's funny because actually I did have to go back into rental not long ago when I moved down to London. And I know it's a quick fire round, so I keep it quick. But we moved into a rental, and obviously I won't name the landlord, but they didn't really maintain it very well. And come the checkout, I actually felt like a second-class citizen, like as if I wasn't being respected. And I am actually still going on with the tenant deposit dispute now, and it's not very nice. And I've bought my house I bought the house in where I live now in late November, early December, and I'm still going on with this checkout now. So we're 2 months down the line now. That's holding up over £2,500 of my money into the deposit scheme, which, if that deposit scheme wasn't there, where would my rights be? So it's fantastic. And I know other landlords do get burned, and that's, again, it's a brilliant proposition for everybody, and it does keep everything right. But yeah, if you keep it right, then it is well maintained, and you've got then no problems with your tenant. Obviously, you have the other end of it where you've got poor landlords who do get poor tenants, which is an issue as well. But to keep them happy, yeah, that will make your life much easier.
Guys, I think it's time to rename the quickfire rounds.
Yeah.
Every week.
We just call it the 3 questions.
Sorry.
But before we go, I've been itching to ask a question for the last 25 minutes or so, but haven't been able to get my nose in. If I'm looking for a buy to let, and I'm an inexperienced investor, the first place I go, honestly, is Rightmove to start off with. I'm based in Bracknell. I'm going to type Bracknell within 3 miles, under a certain price that I can afford, and I'm going to start looking for the right buy to let. How do I go about sourcing an auction property if I'm less concerned about location, but I'm really looking at what I can get out of it?
Yeah, it is a very good question, and I would say if you are looking as a first-time investor, or even as as someone who has a portfolio, it's about actually probably checking in with some of these auction houses as well. We advertise obviously nationally through Rightmove and so forth, but to find the right area, I think I've seen a lot of landlords get burnt in the past before by, I'm from the northeast, so anyone that knows the northeast may know the Peterlee area, and there's an area around there where property prices, you can buy a 2-bedroom house for £10,000, but to get that property let is extremely difficult. And when I first started out in auctions, I had a lot of people buying those properties for £30,000-40,000 from the London market and feeling it sounds like a good area, it looks like a good property. They wouldn't call us up, they wouldn't view it, they'd send somebody to have a look at it, they'd download the legal documents, everything would be fine, and they'd burn £30,000 on a 10 grand property. And then they'd come back to me a month later and say, I can't rent it. Can you sell it for me? I can sell it for you, but it's only worth 10 grand. So you're going to lose 20 on it, and it's an awful area. So speak to the auction house. The auction house are going to be the best person to advise you. So someone like myself or a local, an expert that we have in our team to say, actually, that's a good investment. That's a really good investment. You can rent it out for this amount. We work with agents all over the country as well. So if you're registering with those agents, ask them if they offer auction. So speak to that agent. Do you offer auction? There is a filter available on Rightmove as well, where you can actually search auction properties. A lot of people don't know that. So when you very first put your search area in, so if you put, Bracknell in, just as a whole geographical, if you want it to be local to you, Mike, you want to be in touch and distance to go and have a look at the tenants and check on the property. If you just type in Bracknell, you then just search, you then go into the filter. There is an auction property option there. So that will filter out anything that is listed through an auction house. And then you can start looking at that investment. But the simplest way, and I think, a lot of people rely on looking on Rightmove and just purchasing, but actually I'm a bit more of an old school guy like you probably are, and it's actually speaking to people, and then having a conversation and checking in before you do just commit to something or feel as though it's a good investment and without getting your fingers burned. So yeah, you can do it through the online, but I would advise touch base with some of your local auction houses or national ones like ourselves.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more that the more people you talk to, the better view that you get of something rather than just taking it on a whim. And I do know the Northeast. You wouldn't know from my accent, but I am from around those parts, and good areas are available.
They are available, yes. I do have to say, and Peterlee's not a bad area. It isn't a bad area. It's just the prices haven't increased, So when you're looking at that from an investment point of view, you might go, great, yeah, I can do that. And like I say, anyone who has bought in that area, I know lots of landlords who bought at the right time and actually have a very, very good business there as well. But you just have to be careful. You just never know. And if you're not doing that due diligence and speaking with that local area, that local agent, or that that auctioneer to just understand, it has been rented out before, it's vacant now, was it rented out? What was it achieving? Do your due diligence. I'd say that to anybody. Make sure that you do that due diligence and make sure that you're not just committing to something.
So we're ending on a note that's quite common that we end on is do your diligence, do your research, and ask the right questions before you act. It's something that's come up, I think, over and over again. So on that note, Lee, I'm going to say thanks very much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
On behalf of the three of us, I really enjoyed it. I know Ian did. Because of the questions that were coming thick and fast. I hope your head's not spinning too much. No. If anyone's got any more questions, obviously on the podcast, we'll pop the links to Lee and Lee's business. If someone wants to see more, know more. Again, if you've been listening to our podcast through each series, please drop us a note. Let us know who you want to speak to. It's another podcast in the can, really enjoyable one for me, because Lee's got so much experience in his sector. Again, just a reminder, Lee's from SDL Auctions and he's the head auctioneer. Their website is sdlauctions.co.uk. It'll be on our socials, but please feel free to reach out if you've got any more questions from him. But Tristan, what was your biggest takeaway from that?
For me, it's you can buy properties with tenants in situ, which is becoming more common for those guys. But on top of that, the process time for them is incredibly quick. It said from start to finish, you could see a sale go through within 2 months, which is quick for a seller and a buyer, I suppose. So great advantages on that, but definitely those for me.
I totally agree. I mean, with transaction times taking 16, 18 weeks in a lot of cases, to be able to cut that in 3 is a massive advantage to some people who either need to cash out quickly in order to move on, or are just looking to make that investment without the problems that chains and other parties can cause. Ian, what about yourself?
Yeah, I think the first question that I mentioned was just about the persona that people have around auctions, and just the vision that you have that pops into your head about this kind of dingy room, and the old brown wooden hammer, the gavel. And actually, from the podcast, for me personally, a completely different perspective on the auction process, how people can operate now, the amount of eyeballs on each individual property from doing it live and online. Is probably more than tenfold, but that's fantastic, I think, for the seller. And I think there's loads of exciting things for a property investor as well. The security around the research and the kind of legal pack that you get prior is really good. And actually, it got me thinking, that is something that could easily be done in resi market sales to speed up the process if you've got a seller that needs a quick sale that isn't auction related. So it was really insightful. Lee was really knowledgeable, and I think people listening would have taken a lot from it. For me, the unconditional and conditional transaction options, the flexibility, I felt auctions prior to the podcast were very rigid. It was about, fast and cheap. And actually to know that it's 40-60 unconditional selling, where people could sell potentially with tenant in situ, but looking for max price, that's quite insightful. I was quite interested by that. And it's definitely a different type of conversation that I could now have with someone about auctions. We always say we learn something ourselves. That's the privilege we've got to do in this. But they for me, were the key takeaways, really, Mike.
Yeah, I think for me, it was the reminder that, don't just get excited about a property 200 miles away because it looks cheap. It sounds really obvious when you say it, but everybody does it on the portals. You look at these properties for 50, 40, 30,000 pounds and just think, wow, I could buy 10 of those and do a bit of monopoly. It's not that easy. Otherwise everyone would be doing it and the prices wouldn't be what they are. But it's about finding an auction house for me, searching them out and how to source them. Look within that same radius, maybe within 10 miles of you, to see if there are any auctions going on in not auctions happening in your area, but properties that are listed through auction houses, and have a chat with them to see how it works, see what the options are, and see whether as a buyer, as a landlord, you can get something out of that.
Yeah, 100%. Totally agree.
So that's the end of another week. Again, if you're someone who's listened to every single one of our podcasts, we'd love to hear from you, because we're in season 3 now and we're looking for more people. If there's someone you want to hear from, if there's something in the property industry and lettings and property management that you don't understand, or you want the secrets blown wide open, drop us a line and we'll do our best to get someone on and ask the questions that you want asked. But for another week, from myself, from Ian and Tristan, we'll speak to you soon.
I'm flicking through YouTube and through Spotify. I don't think there's a podcast or a video channel on YouTube that landlords can land on where they're not being sold something.
I mean, it'd be the first time any estate agents ever asked that question, but why not ask that question to a wider audience?
Estate agents have the knowledge there, but they don't seem to share it.
You can do different episodes based around someone that wants an exit plan or someone that's just starting their portfolio.
The rules change every year.
Yeah.
But why not just open the floor out and just say, well, is property even the best investment out there?
And tax advice is a big thing, especially with everything that's changed, capital gains tax, and obviously your stamp duty costs that you need to pay and whatnot. People don't realise what they need to prepare for.
We build a podcast and we build a YouTube channel, somewhere that landlords can go and they feel they're not being sold to, but they're just getting quality advice.